What began as a quiet contract dispute has now exploded into one of the most uncomfortable and closely watched dramas in recent K-pop history. Danielle's separation from NewJeans was not just another idol agency disagreement buried in legal paperwork. It quickly evolved into a public unraveling filled with court rulings, competing narratives, and a growing sense that something far darker was happening behind the scenes. The deeper observers dig, the harder it becomes to view this as a clean break or a simple misunderstanding. For nearly a year, tensions simmered between Danielle and her agency, ADOR, as both sides issued statements that seemed carefully worded yet sharply opposed. While fans initially hoped for reconciliation, the situation moved steadily toward confrontation. That turning point arrived when ADOR officially announced the termination of Danielle's exclusive contract, confirming her removal from NewJeans after months of legal battles that had already fractured public trust. According to the company, the decision was not sudden. It was the result of repeated conflicts, failed negotiations, and actions they claimed made continued collaboration impossible. ADOR framed the situation as a matter of broken trust. They alleged multiple violations of contract terms, including unauthorized activities and decisions that, in their view, directly harmed the group's reputation and commercial stability. This was no longer just about creative differences or management disagreements. It was about control, legality, and the boundaries that define an idol's career. The courts ultimately sided with ADOR, validating the contracts and reinforcing the agency's authority, at least on paper. Yet, even with a clear legal ruling, the story didn't end. Danielle stood apart from her former group, facing not only professional exile but looming financial and legal consequences. While other members resumed activities, her silence only intensified speculation. And just when the situation seemed destined to fade quietly, a new development surfaced online, one that would reopen old wounds and introduce an entirely new layer of controversy. If you want to understand how this story shifts from legal conflict to something far more unsettling, make sure you stay with us. Subscribe to the channel and keep watching, because what comes next is where everything starts to feel truly wrong. The moment that reignited the entire controversy didn't come from a courtroom or an official press release. It came from a single image quietly circulating online. At first glance, the photo appeared harmless, even positive. Danielle was seen participating in what looked like charity work, surrounded by volunteers, smiling away from the stage lights and industry pressure. For many casual viewers, it seemed like a simple attempt to move forward, a former idol choosing a low-profile, meaningful activity after a painful public fallout. But the internet rarely stops at first impressions. As the image spread, people began to zoom in, analyze, and question details that didn't quite add up. A blurred section in the background quickly became the focal point of debate. Shapes that resembled professional filming equipment, a large microphone, and what appeared to be production staff sparked immediate suspicion. This was not the kind of setup typically associated with private volunteer work. The narrative began to shift almost instantly. Speculation exploded across social media. Was this truly charity? Or was it content? Was Danielle simply helping out? Or was she participating in a filmed project during an active legal dispute? In the context of her contract termination, those questions carried serious weight. ADOR had previously cited unauthorized entertainment activities as a core reason for cutting ties. If this event was staged, scheduled, or filmed for broadcast, it could reinforce the very accusations that ended her career with the group. Reports soon claimed the volunteer activity had been planned in advance and connected to a Korean variety production. Whether confirmed or not, the timing alone raised eyebrows. What should have been a quiet, neutral appearance suddenly felt risky. For critics, intent mattered less than optics. Even if Danielle never appeared on screen, the presence of cameras suggested participation in structured media activity, exactly the kind of gray area she could not afford to enter. As doubts multiplied, public sympathy began to fracture. What once looked like a gentle return to normal life now felt like another boundary being tested, another line blurred at the worst possible moment. As the controversy around the charity photo intensified, another detail quietly pushed the situation from uncomfortable into potentially serious territory. Clips and screenshots connected to the alleged filming began circulating, and viewers noticed Danielle referring to herself using the name NJZ. On its own, the reference might have seemed insignificant, even habitual. But given the legal context, it immediately set off alarms among those closely following the case. The court ruling had been explicit. Danielle was no longer permitted to independently use the NewJeans name or any branding closely associated with the group. That boundary was meant to be clear, final, and enforceable. So hearing the NJZ name surface again even casually reopened debates about legality, intent, and public confusion. Critics argued that continuing to associate herself with the group name could mislead audiences into believing she still held an official connection, undermining the brand ADOR retained full control over. Online discussion shifted sharply. This was no longer about whether a volunteer event was genuine or staged. It became a question of repeated behavior. To skeptics, the name usage felt less like a slip of the tongue and more like part of an ongoing pattern of ignoring restrictions. In that framing, the charity appearance, the filming rumors, and the branding issue all began to connect, forming a narrative that aligned uncomfortably well with ADOR's original claims. Supporters pushed back, insisting that context was missing and that short clips rarely tell the full story. But even among neutral observers, there was growing agreement on one point: Danielle was operating in a legal minefield. With lawsuits still active and scrutiny at its peak, every word, every appearance, and every association carried consequences. There was no room left for ambiguity. What made the situation even heavier was the sense that these weren't isolated mistakes happening after the fact. Many began to wonder whether warnings had already been issued behind closed doors, whether Danielle knew how close she was to crossing irreversible lines, and whether this outcome had been quietly approaching long before the public ever realized. Just as the focus seemed locked on Danielle's actions, attention began drifting toward the people and environments surrounding her. Rumors surfaced suggesting that this controversy extended beyond a single charity appearance or a disputed name. Some claimed that Danielle's mother being named in the lawsuit was not incidental, but connected to broader plans unfolding behind the scenes. Whispers of a potential documentary project began circulating, allegedly centered on Danielle's marathon training alongside Sean, the same figure linked to the charity event. If true, the implications were serious. A documentary is not an accidental appearance or a casual recording. It is a structured entertainment project, one that would almost certainly require agency approval under an exclusive contract. For critics, this possibility reframed everything. The charity work, the filming equipment, the rumored variety show, and now a potential documentary all seemed to overlap in a way that felt calculated rather than coincidental. Adding to the unease was the resurfacing of Sean's own controversial history. Old photos connected to his charity circle reappeared online, drawing renewed scrutiny. One image from years earlier showed figures who were later exposed and convicted in some of the most notorious scandals in K-pop history. While the photo predated those crimes, the optics were disturbing in hindsight. For many observers, it raised uncomfortable questions about judgment, associations, and the environments being normalized under the banner of goodwill. This resurfacing shifted the narrative yet again. Danielle was no longer being viewed in isolation, but as someone stepping into a network already burdened by controversy. Even those attempting to remain neutral admitted that the timing could not have been worse. With legal pressure mounting, any association with figures tied to past scandals amplified public suspicion. What might have been framed as personal growth or recovery now felt, to critics, like another example of blurred lines between image management and genuine action. And as each layer unfolded, the idea that this dispute was nearing its end began to feel increasingly unrealistic. When all the pieces are placed side by side, the situation surrounding Danielle no longer feels like a single misstep or an unfortunate misunderstanding. It looks like a slow-building collision between legal boundaries, public image, and decisions made at moments when caution mattered most. What began as a contract dispute has transformed into a tangled web of speculation, resurfaced controversies, and increasingly damaging optics. Each new detail reinforces the perception that this conflict was never truly resolved, only paused. For many observers, the most unsettling part is not any single allegation, but the pattern that appears to be forming. Unauthorized activities, blurred lines between personal and professional projects, repeated associations with controversy, and the persistent reemergence of restricted branding all point to a situation spiraling further out of control. Whether intentional or not, the consequences are unfolding publicly, in real time, and under relentless scrutiny. At this stage, it becomes harder to separate sympathy from accountability. Public opinion is shifting from isolated explanations to broader conclusions about judgment, timing, and responsibility. And as legal actions remain active, the story is far from finished. If anything, it feels like the groundwork has been laid for an even more explosive next chapter. If you want to stay ahead of where this is going, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. This story isn't over yet, and what comes next may change everything.